This podcast is sponsored by Inside Out Group, the specialists in high-risk and challenging filming and time-lapse, covering health and safety videos for rail, construction, and infrastructure projects nationwide.
Welcome to this week's Safer Than Your Average. On the show this week, we've got Duncan. Duncan, if you just want to come in and introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Duncan Aspin. I'm a head of health, safety, environment, quality and sustainability and business continuity, as a matter of fact, for a construction and civil engineering and marine organisation. I am massively passionate about behaviour change. I am a behaviour change ambassador for the University of Derby. And also, until recently, of course, with the COVID-19 thing, I've been doing a lot of going around the UK and the rest of Europe, actually promoting the behaviour change as part of being an ambassador. And I also act as a MC cum facilitator for the She Show, which some of you may have attended, both in Manchester and Newcastle.
Brilliant, thank you, Duncan. So I don't know if you've seen the format of the podcast. We'd like to just go right back to the beginning. Tell us a bit about your early life, where you grew up.
Okay, well, how far back do you want to go? Interesting fact, actually, is I was actually born in a place called, Roundthorne Road in Glodwick in Oldham. So I was actually born at home, so isn't that going far back? And the reason I bring that up is because I was actually delivered by Dr. Patrick Steptoe, who was the pioneer with the test tube baby, because my mother was a nurse and worked for him, and he delivered me. So a very minor claim to fame there, potentially. So yeah, I was brought up in Oldham, and my father actually owned he was a joiner, and he then started running his own construction company and developed into quite a successful company, really. So I probably spent a lot of my early life labouring on construction sites. So I was working on construction sites way before you're supposed to do. So probably from about the age of 10 onwards. And I learned very early on that when your father's throwing bricks to you in packs of 4, you don't drop them. So that was one of my first skills I learned, to catch 4 bricks at a time as they were being thrown to me and pack them in good stacks. In other things, I started driving things like 6-ton dumpers way before I should have done as well, and bouncing around on those metal seats. And I fell off my first scaffold whilst erecting it at the age of 13. So really good introduction into safety, really, in terms of my experiences. And I probably had quite a lot of experiences that I think my father tried to kill me on a regular basis on construction sites, really. If you look at those YouTube videos that we all love to look at and see how ridiculous people are behaving, I think I've done most of them. I think that it was interesting, though, that in labouring on construction sites through my early life, it gave me really, really deep respect for the people who work on construction sites, because it can be a very tough environment. You know, you're working in very difficult circumstances, sometimes very cold circumstances or very hot, and the conditions are not always great. And I really got a massively deep respect for the people that did that work, and that's a respect that I've kept with me throughout my whole career, really, from that moment on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess that's my early life. Brought up in Oldham, eventually moved out of Oldham, like most people do, and broke out, went and lived in the southeast for quite a while, before moving back to the northwest, which is where I live now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Duncan. So if you move on to tell us about your first kind of job after you left education, then.
Well, I guess it follows on to some extent from being a labourer on construction sites. I guess I was always going to end up in construction, and therefore I did go into university to study construction. A friend of mine says he didn't believe you could have a degree in bricklaying, but I went to Coventry Polytechnic, as it was then, or Lanchester University, as I like to call it now. So I went to Coventry Polytechnic to really understand the management side of construction. And the reason I did that really was with my father's construction company that was being reasonably successful. He wanted somebody with a bit more of the business mind to help operate the business. Unfortunately, that was in the early 1980s, which some people may remember there was somewhat of a recession on the time. And during that period, whilst I was at university, my father's construction company went into liquidation. So I ended up working for major civil engineering companies. So I guess my first job, I actually started out in a design and build company in Maidenhead, working as an assistant project manager. And I guess it was then that I probably realized I was quite strong-minded, because it was my first job in construction on the management side of things. And very quickly, I went to the director of the business and said, I don't want to be an assistant project manager because I don't like somebody else checking on my work, and I want to do my own thing. So he gave me my own jobs, which was great. But again, it was the experience of the 80s that company actually went under. In fact, it was interesting. We actually got a tannoy message, because that's the way they used to do things in those days. We got a tannoy message on our phones saying the construction company's going under. You've got 2 hours to clear your desk and get out of the offices. And that was the notice we got for that. And there was security guards waiting on the gates as well to make sure that none of us took any of the equipment away. So I got a fairly early baptism into the cyclical approach that you can have in construction with regards to the boom times and the bust times as well. But really, from there, I would say my first proper job in construction was working as an engineer on a I think it was probably a £60 million job at the time, which would probably equate to a couple of $100 million at least now. Working on Bicester Prison, actually, in near Banbury. I learned a lot about construction then, because interestingly, my job as an engineer was called the secure routes, and that was to connect 26 buildings together with all the secure routes. And what I learned about that is when you've got 26 buildings with 26 different engineers and they don't work to the same controls, connecting those buildings up is really, really difficult. It really is. So yeah, I guess my first real job in construction, as far as I'm concerned, was working as a trainee engineer and then an engineer. But I then continued really through the engineering route, and that's my background really. It's civil engineering background. Most of my operational career was in civil engineering, and I started out trainee engineer, worked up to a site engineer, and then a section engineer, sub-agent, and then a site agent or site manager, as they're more commonly called now. And I spent quite a few years as a site manager before moving across to health and safety. And it's interesting, really, because if I go back to kind of like my upbringing, which was on construction sites, labouring on construction sites, and as I mentioned, I really developed a real deep respect for people who work on construction sites. But I had a massive passion for thinking that, challenging the general thought that construction sites were okay to be untidy, they were okay for it to be bad conditions. You'd go in the welfare if you were lucky to have any welfare in the 80s. And it'd be atrocious. I remember working on a construction site with 200 people and one toilet, and I didn't accept that those conditions were right. And I had a massive passion for wanting, actually, for conditions to be at least as good as it would be if you work in a factory or an office, because why shouldn't they be? It's a really difficult condition that people need that working on construction. So we should expect the best, So, and I took that passion really to my work as a site manager, and I always made sure a number of things really. I made sure that my sites had really good welfare and really good access on site and really good safety. And I also, whenever I was planning work, I always involved the people who were going to do the work in actually doing the planning. I mean, there's still a big trend these days of people writing methods of work, say systems of work, method statements, risk assessments, who are not the people doing the work, and then hand it over to the people who are going to do the work. And that's never felt right for me. And
Yeah.
I mean, the reason really that I spoke to people who were going to do the work when I was planning it is because they knew how to do it and I didn't. And what I found very, very quickly was that by including people in planning the work, including people in figuring out how we were going to do it, by having good standards on site, being passionate about wanting the best for people, that people actually enjoyed coming to work. They had a real passion and pride for what they were doing. And I actually found that my jobs were very profitable for it. And I think this is one thing, a term that I'm not a fan of, and I hear it a number of times, is when people talk about safety at any cost. And I genuinely don't believe in that. I turn that on its head. I believe if you do safety right, you'll make a better profit. You'll have a more efficient site. You'll plan things better, and you will make more margin.
Definitely. You hear that in organisations a lot, don't you? That they say safety is our number one priority. And you say, well, what about making a profit?
Yeah.
You can turn the lights out. If you don't make money, we're not going to have a business, and that's the harsh reality of it. Yep, it's up there. It's one of our top key priorities in the organisation, but ultimately keeping the organisation running and turning a profit and making sure the business is profitable is the ultimate goal for any organisation.
Well, it's a good point, and I think organisations have to be sincere and truthful, and it's a very laudable thing to say that safety is a number one priority. But you're absolutely right; it isn't. Profit is, because without profit, you're not in business. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. But you achieve, or you help to achieve a good profit by doing the job safely, by doing it to a good quality. These things are absolutely linked. In fact, I've always come across in the way I sell safety, if I want to call it selling, when I'm dealing with managing directors and senior managers of organisations. You'll do your NEBOSH certificate early on in your career. And you talk about three headings, and I hope I can remember them now. So you've got financial, moral, and legal. There we are. I did remember. And that's all well and good and true. However, I find that if you really want to get the buy-in from business leaders, then you have to talk their language. And I've always sold safety from a profitability point of view. That if you do safety well, we will have a better business. And I've found that way, that by talking the same language, that you can get people on board much better. And it's one of the things I would actually recommend, to be honest with you, of any safety professional, that talk the business language, understand business language, and talk business language.
Yeah, that's great advice, Duncan. I think being able to go in and have an understanding of how the processes in an organisation work outside of your little sphere of safety as well, being able to understand profit and loss and what all of the other meetings are, and getting a little bit of interaction and understanding how they work and how they integrate into the business, the pressures that the project management team are faced, stands you in good stead to understand the business operation and the pressures that they're faced with when you go and try and ask them to do something. So I think that's fantastic advice for people, and I think people take a lot away from that. Well,
it's interesting as well, if you're a safety professional that's got aspirations to get to the very top and become a health and safety director, then you'll be sitting in board meetings where only part of what you talk about is health and safety, and you're expected to contribute to every part of that business in terms of profitability, in terms of HR, in terms of planning, commercial, finance. And you're expected to be an equal partner in having those conversations. So it's absolutely essential to understand that side of the business as well.
Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit, you moved into health and safety from being a project manager. Can you tell us a bit about your first safety job? Where was that?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I was very keen to get into health and safety. And I'll just go a little bit more into from being a site manager to moving over to health and safety.
Yeah.
Because what I did find, as I said before, is I found that my jobs were running very well by taking the approach that I did. And I could just go from job to job doing that and making sure my jobs were as good as it could be. But I felt that there was something I could do here, that I had a real skill for getting the best out of people and actually, you know, achieving the best in on a job. And I thought, well, why don't I do this as my career? So I wanted to move over to health and safety. So I went and did my NEBOSH certificate at night school, and passed first time, thankfully, because it's not the easiest thing in the world. And then from there, I looked for opportunities to get a position, and thankfully I got a position in the same company I was still working for. But I had to travel quite a bit. So I lived in the Northwest, and I worked in Birmingham and south of Birmingham. So interestingly enough, my journey to work every morning, and this is genuine, was 2 to 3 hours, and 2 to 3 hours home every night. But I wanted to be in health and safety. And it was interesting because I did an awful lot of traveling in those days. And it was a little bit frustrating, my first job in a way, because I was responsible for kind of like the minor side of the rail construction. So I'd travel for 5 hours to go and see two guys under a railway bridge pointing brickwork. You know, and it was a little bit soul destroying from that point of view. But it gave me the opening and the opportunity to get into health and safety, which really then took me on to my first real safety job, as far as I'm concerned, which was working for the same company again. It was actually Burst Construction, who unfortunately don't exist anymore, but a great company. And I worked as a health and safety manager, firstly for Northwest, and then I worked as the head of health and safety for Burst Coastal. And what that gave me for the first time is the opportunity to get all my passions and all my beliefs in the way that we should manage health and safety and actually put them into practice. And some of the things that were absolutely key to me. So one of the first things I did, I could not stand. Well, I had a rule of thumb that I had for myself was. A job had to be, I had to be able to go to a job and be proud to take anybody else to that job. And that was kind of my benchmark. And I was a little bit disappointed at first in some of the standards that I was seeing. And really simple things, you know, that might not seem to make a difference at first. I hated seeing lots of paper pinned to notice boards, just get all random and all over the place. So one of the first things I did was get proper notice boards and get them properly designed with the business logo on it. And you'll see that all over the place now. And then I also designed a standard setup for all the sites. So if you ever went to any of our sites, anywhere in the country, they all look the same.
Yeah.
And so, and I built safety into that. So as you entered the site, you had a proper segregated route. You had proper signage that looked right. You weren't allowed to have Harris panels as gates, you know, which were always then falling over and breaking. You had to have proper gates in place. You had to have proper segregated route to your office. Even insisted on every office setup, no matter how large or small, had a reception. Because another thing that really kind of like irritated me was walking into construction sites where you just walked into a side door straight into a load of offices. And the reception was your first opportunity for people to see, you know, the kind of like the image of the construction of your company. Also insisted on proper car parking places and all that sort of thing. And I standardized that across the company. But I also standardized things like the filing system, you know, because I didn't like just going in and seeing just random ways of doing things. So standardized the filing system, which had the benefit that when you went onto our sites, anywhere you went, anybody could pick up from a job that somebody else was doing and start and know exactly what they were doing. I later found out that it was all called McDonaldization. So that's creating a standard approach, which McDonald's do, of course, and a lot of other companies do, creating a standard approach. But what it was really doing, my initial passion was really to give people the proper standards. And also, as you walk through the door or walk through the gate of the site, you knew that we meant business. Because early on, one of the challenges that I often used to get was, well, it's okay, Duncan, we're doing pretty well with health and safety on this site. But we'll get another subcontractor in next week who will have worked on a site where they don't take safety as seriously, and we'll be starting all afresh again. And I didn't really accept that. And I thought that and had a genuine belief that if you set up your site right from the start, if that first impression really made an impact on people, then you could change people's perceptions and behaviors right from the start. And I found that did work. And interestingly enough, I put a 5-year plan in for how we were going to develop health and safety. And I think that's another thing to really consider for any health and safety professional, by the way. Always make sure just like any other part of the business, where you'll have a business plan for what you're doing, have a business plan for health and safety.
Yeah.
So I developed a 5-year strategy, and then I broke that down into annual business plans, and therefore it wasn't a new plan each year. It was building on where we were trying to get to with the 5-year strategy. And we had 4 years without a single accident, in a pretty large national construction company. Mm-hmm. And I think that's got to come from the work that we did in improving the site standards and getting that first impression right. Now, I'll never be one that says you measure safety by the lack of accidents, mm-hmm. but 4 years of continual improvement, and also our supply chain really getting on board. I got to the stage where I had subcontractors ringing me up and saying, "Duncan, can you come down to the site, have a look what we've done here? We've just come up with this new way of doing this, and we'd like to see what we've done." And I think this is the really important thing in managing health and safety. It's taking this positive approach is absolutely essential. And I think by recognizing the positive things that people are doing, you absolutely get discretionary effort. And what I was finding more and more is, like, say, supply chain members phoning me up and saying, "We've done this, come and have a look." And also sites ringing me up when they had problems saying, "Can you help us out with this? And what do you think?" Because we had that open and trusting approach. Yep. And I think trust is essential. Trust is absolutely essential. And the saying goes something like, it takes a lifetime to build trust and a minute to destroy it. And that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. So I do spend a lot of time still now building up trust. So as I said right at the beginning, I'm passionate about behaviour change, and for me, behaviour change is about having a positive approach, about genuinely including the people that are doing the work, and about having a future focused view on things rather than looking back on things. Mm-hmm. And time and time again, I see that by taking a positive approach, it doesn't mean that you don't identify things that need improving. Of course you do, but you do that in a positive way as well. And I see time and time again where I see sites improving, I see supply chain improving, because they're passionate and they build from your passion on wanting to do a better job. In fact, during the COVID-19, which was still in, of course, I took over a few. I went back to doing a safety advisor job on a few jobs, which I found quite nice, to be honest with you. Moving away from all the politics for a little while, and I took the same approach, a positive approach, and I found even within just a few weeks, the improvements were massive. And I remember one of the sites ringing me up and saying, "Can you have a look at what we've done with this segregation? Come and have a look, it's brilliant." And it was. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, you see, if I went on a site and said, "I want you to segregate this route," then that's probably, at best, that's what I get. But by getting the passion from people to want to make their own decisions on things, then you actually get people to go a lot further than you would probably anticipate that they would do. Mm-hmm. So I think your question was somewhere around what was my first job, I think, out of all of that. But I progressed a little bit from that, because my learning through all of my jobs, through all the jobs that I've done, is it's all about people. Mm-hmm. It's about nothing else other than people. We can't do the job without people, and the old adages that ring true, treat people like you'd like to be treated yourself. Treat people with respect, and have a genuine respect. People see through you if you're not genuine. So have a genuine respect for caring about people. And by the way, in the health and safety profession, you've got to care and you've got to have passion, because if you don't have, then you're in the wrong job. Because there are hard times in health and safety where there are struggles and times when you don't think you're making a difference. And it's those times when you really need that passion, you really need that energy, and you really need that caring for other people that is absolutely genuine. But equally, if you are genuine, people see that.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that 100%. Some of the best results that I've had out engaging with people is when you go with that positive approach and you say, doing a great job there. Have you considered this? It goes back to the old adage, if you go out, stop, you're doing that wrong. It already creates that conflict there right away. If you go out and you say, I'm doing a great job there, let's have a look at doing it this way, can we have a little chat about it? You're going to get their buy-in right away because you've disarmed them. They're expecting you to come with that conflict because of the preconceived, insert name of national newspapers, ideals of the old elfin safety type of approach.
Yes,
And
elfin
that's
safety, as Terry
wrong.
Wogan used to call it, elfin safety. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's absolutely true that taking that positive approach makes a huge difference. I can give so many examples, but I remember once going to a site and they had some real problems with congestion on the site, and I could see straight away that they needed access to this cofferdam, but they had plant operations going on around the place, and it was quite frankly dangerous in terms of how they were getting access to that. You know, the approach would be could be, that's dangerous. You need to stop what you're doing there. Get some segregation in place. But instead, I asked. I said, "What do you think about the access here?" Well, we do have a bit of a problem that we've been trying to get over, and where we need to do this job here, but we need to get access in there. Well, what do you think, Duncan? I said, well, tell me what your thoughts are, and we talked about it for a while. And we came up with some ideas. And then when I went back a week later, they said, Duncan, come and have a look. And they'd actually changed the whole site layout. They'd even moved cabins that they'd set out. Now, that would never have happened if it wasn't their idea in the first place, you know. And one of the things I often say, actually, because it often happens when I'm speaking to site managers, particularly and foremen, well, they say, Duncan, we keep telling them what to do, but it's just not happening. You know, and I say, well, how often are you going to tell them before you realise that telling isn't going to make a difference? Have you tried asking?
Yeah.
You know, and it's amazing. Again, another example is, and it's a really simple example, where I was on a site where it was a very large site over many miles, and the foreman was saying, we're having a real problem with guys leaving the gates open into landowners and farmers' areas. And I keep telling the guys that they need to close the gates. Well, they're just not doing it. And I said, well, have you asked them? And we did. We asked them. And it was really simple. Because they said, well, the problem is when we're exiting the fields and the areas of land, we're straight onto the main road. And we can't really stop our tractors on the main road. So we just drive away. And all they had to do was set the gates back a little bit further so they could stop whilst they were still off the road, and it was all sorted. The solutions come from asking, not from telling.
Yeah. And as John Green said when he was on the podcast a few weeks ago, it's all about asking better questions, isn't it?
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. I mean, John's fantastic at this stuff, isn't he? And he absolutely lives the positive approach to this thing. And I'm going to steal that. I like that.
Oh, it's fantastic. It was it was the nugget that I took away from the podcast, getting to interview someone so prominent and coming up with that. It's all about asking better questions. I just thought you've hit the nail on the head there.
Let me just write that down. Asking better questions. That's fantastic. I mean, John's done a great job, hasn't he? I mean, he definitely sells the safety differently approach. And I know some people criticise the safety differently, but I don't see why, because it's all about taking a positive approach. It's all about learning from what we do well rather than what we fail at. And how can you criticise that? It's got to be the right approach.
You've opened up that can now, Duncan, so we're going to have to talk about that. So in the past few weeks, I've seen some real blazing arguments on LinkedIn about safety differently versus, it's not peer reviewed and we've not bottomed this out, and does it reduce accidents? It's something that safety differently, people that are evangelists of safety differently won't tell you. But as John said when he was on the podcast, it was never meant to be a this or that approach that we work at the Church of Safety Differently. It was supposed to be something new in addition to some of the traditional methods, while getting away from some of the traditional methods that don't work. That was all. you know. It's now become, because of the global success of it, and it's become a global phenomenon that you're either for safety differently or you're not for safety differently. I think some people have read the books and went, oh, I think I'm for safety differently, so let's rip up the rule book and start everything again. That's not what it was about. It was about having a more positive approach, recognising that people offer the solution, not the problem, is the kind of key principles of it. So I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing. And I'll be honest, when I first read Sidney Decker's book, I read it cover to cover on holiday, and I put it down and I went, don't believe in that. And I read it again and I went, nah, I can see where he's coming from. And then it wasn't until I started researching and watching some of the videos of guys like Todd Conklin and seeing some of the stuff that John was doing as well, some of the presentations that he had done, I thought, yeah, do you know what? There is massive mileage in this. It's really interesting. I'm really enthused by it. And there's another guy that's really out there with it, a guy called Jay Allen that runs Safety FM over in America. Jay's really promoting the kind of human operational performance side of things, the HOP side of things, which is factored in slightly to safety differently as well, and really promoting it. So there's loads of people out there doing loads of good work, all trying to achieve the same goal.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the thing, you said it yourself, safety differently is not, it's just like anything else, it's not a silver bullet. It's part of the whole process. I guess there is a danger if you label anything, then you've got that danger that people will think you're either for or against. And some people say, well, it's not safety differently, it's safety just the same. Well, it depends how you've been delivering safety in the past. And yeah, it is just part of the picture. And I think this is one of the dangers that we've had in safety with behavioural safety in the past. Whilst behavioural safety in the past has had an impact, there's no doubt about it. It is a little bit of a single tool. It's kind of like no matter what the problem is, this is the solution. And you really, one of my passions around behavior change, and it's really obvious stuff that I talk about behavior change, and my description of behavior change, it's about understanding the influences on behavior and removing the barriers to change. Whereas in some respects, a lot of behavioral based safety doesn't try and understand the problem before solving it, because it says, here's a set of tools that you do and you deliver. And there's no doubt it can have some impact, but you've really got to recognize that. I think I said it to you before we started recording, that one of my sayings is that behaviors are complex, not complicated, and behaviors are influenced by so many different things. So that's the complex side of it. But the solutions are usually very easy. As you said yourself before the podcast, that actually the most simple solutions are the best. So don't look for complex solutions, because the most simple solutions will work the best.
They're the most likely to be followed by the people on the ground. If you make it easy for someone to do something, they'll do it. You know, it goes back to the old image of the crossing point on a canal towpath, and you see the people have walked over the grass rather than walking over the concrete path, because it was easier to take the shortcut around about the bollard rather than go through the kind of zigzag that the vehicles getting onto the canal towpath. You know, it's making it simple, making it straightforward, and that will then factor into the user experience.
Well, it's interesting, you know, I was, because I spend a lot of time doing behavioural analysis on particular issues, and I was looking with a site only the other day on something really simple, where they were talking about the fact that damaged equipment wasn't being quarantined. And one of the things I asked them is, have you got a quarantine area? And they didn't have. You know, so how do we expect anybody to quarantine anything if you haven't even got a quarantine area? And this is where some of the solutions are really, really simple.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to touch on this one a little bit, Duncan, because I think this could be quite an interesting conversation. What do you think off the back of COVID-19? Do you think mental health is going to factor into how we influence behaviours on site?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought around the mental health side of COVID-19, because I think we've all heard different stories around COVID-19, and I've certainly heard a strong message that the whole approach to COVID-19 has improved safety performance on sites. Potentially that's true. It's a little bit anecdotal and probably too early to tell. But there's certainly some things we've done from a COVID-19 point of view that can be lessons learned for the future in the way that we should approach improvements in health and safety in general. I mean, there's some great approaches in terms of the consistent message from the leadership right down to the frontline supervisors, and the clear messages that we're giving, and the real engagement we've got with people. These are standard things that we should be doing across all health and safety.
Yeah.
But it's interesting with the point around the mental health, because just like any risk, people have different levels of risk perception. And there are some people who are very concerned about the whole risk around COVID-19, or quite often concerned about the potential of the impact on the families, particularly if they've got vulnerable members of the family. But then there's some people that just aren't concerned about it at all, and nobody's wrong in that. These are just different risk perceptions. But one of the challenges here, I think, around my personal thoughts around two things: working from home. Now this is an interesting thing, because there's a lot of talk now about well, for people that can work from home, who normally work from the offices, perhaps this is the new normal. Perhaps this is the way we should work. And whilst there probably are some real benefits in some flexible working, I think we've got to be very careful about that, because we are sociable animals, and our social interactions are absolutely essential to our mental health. And if we isolate ourselves too much from working from home, then I think there's going to be impacts in a number of ways. I mean, some people will struggle to work from home anyway. There are some people who coming to work is a break from being at home for whatever reason. And we do get so much from interacting with other people, even if we're just working in the offices. I mean, I prefer to work from the office rather than working from home. And the reason I say that, but I might not have any meetings with anybody that day, but I'll bump into so many people and have so many conversations. But there's another side to the mental health, which is potentially a little bit more controversial, which is around the face coverings side of things. And there's really strong arguments on both sides, and I'm not so sure anybody's got the real answer to whether face coverings are the right thing or not. Certainly, I think part of the face coverings approach is to give people the confidence to go out and do what they need to do. But again, it reduces social interaction massively. I actually feel quite depressed when I go into the supermarket and everybody, including myself, is wearing a face covering. You lose so much of that interaction you can have with people. So it is a concern, and there's more and more talk about face coverings coming in. Thankfully, most construction sites, if we just talk about construction, have taken very sensible approaches towards face coverings, and definitely used it in the way that it should be, which is an absolute last resort. I know it was difficult early on, where people didn't really know what the right answer was, and the CLC, the Construction Leadership Council, have got to be given some praise here, to be honest with you. And I'll be honest with you, before COVID-19, I hadn't heard of the Construction Leadership Council, but they've done some great work in giving a consistent approach across construction in terms of how we approach the whole COVID-19 thing, and they've had very sensible approaches to the whole face covering approach. And even to this day in the guidance, that they don't really recommend it, because, in fact, I was having a conversation with, in one of our board meetings recently, where we were talking about the potential for face coverings in the office. And I said, well, if we think about face coverings in the office and we think about it being a kind of like a PPE last resort, then if we think we need face coverings, should we actually be coming back? You know, and that's worth thinking about. But
good point.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. But yes, the whole mental health thing, I think I've actually, a term that I've used, and it's a worry in my respect, that mental health might be the next pandemic in terms of the effects that the whole COVID-19 thing will have on people, in terms of the social isolation, in terms of the worry and the fears that are around it. In terms of the different ways of working, in terms of the lack of socialization, in terms of worrying whether you've got a job, so the people that have been on furlough for such a long time, and a lot of people will and are losing the jobs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're only just started to feel the impact of that. So I do worry that mental health issues or poor mental health is potentially the next pandemic, and the worry is we're really not set up as a country to have the facilities to deal with that. Now, in construction, we and in other organisations, in other industries, we have mental health champions. And I think that's a massive positive. Again, they do come under some criticism, but I think if you've got any culture where you're getting people to talk to each other, has got to be a positive thing. So I think the mental health champions have got a big part to play in this, but we've got to be careful with that, because mental health champions, it can be seen as a tick in the box if we're not careful. We've got our mental health champions, therefore we've done our mental health strategy. And I think there's a long way to go from a health and safety and well-being point of view in dealing with the mental health strategies. It's from a health and safety professionals point of view. I think it's an area where we need to gain a lot better knowledge and a lot better skills ourselves in order to be able to advise our businesses better, in order to put the right strategies in place. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think I've got the right strategies in place at the moment with regards to mental health. There's so much more we can be doing. And it's not, for me, about topic of the month. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a lot of that around at the moment. And that is kind of like fed by things like World Mental Health Day and things like that. And I can see them as a good kind of like jumping board onto new things. But quite often it's, well, we did World Mental Health Day, so we've done our bit. And I think we've got to be very careful in mental health as well as health and safety in talking about topic of the month. Because my challenge when people talk about that sort of thing is, well, really, you shouldn't be doing a topic of the month. What you should be doing is, if you've got an issue, you continue with that issue until the solution is embedded in the organisation.
Yeah.
Or else, but frankly, people won't believe you anyway. Well, we've done that. We're moving on now. We haven't sorted it, but we're moving on. And really, what we need to do in mental health, for me, is be thinking about a few key things that'll make a real difference, and really focusing on those. And I think it's like I said, the health and safety professionals really need to be thinking about that. Because we've all talked in the past, I think, about with health and safety that it's a big S and a small H. And it's interesting, the word health comes first in our titles, but interesting, if we called ourselves safety and health professionals, I think in that in itself would actually would bring the health to more prominence in our roles, I think.
Yeah. So big changes then, change your team name. Everybody to be a SHE professional, safety,
why
health,
not?
and environment.
Yeah, safety, health, and environment, and quality, and sustainability, and everything else that goes along with it as well. Yes.
See, the other thing that you mentioned there was talking about kind of having a look ahead as to what your key themes are going to be, and then starting to manage them. That's always been something I was taught when I was learning about risk management, that you want to try and be impactful at the ascent of the risk curve rather than the descent, to try and flatten the curve out a little bit with your schemes. So risk forecasting, massively important for any organisation to understand in 6, 12, 24 months time what your business is going to look like, what your key business risks are going to be.
Absolutely.
Starting to get your programmes in place to try and tackle that risk while it's on the rise, because if you start to get it when it goes over the other side of the curve and it's decreasing anyway, you might have spent all of that time putting a programme or a plan into place to get it into place, and the risk is already starting to narrow out anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, that goes back to in a sense, understanding the business. And yeah, as part of a health and safety strategy, you absolutely need to understand the business strategy, because the business strategy will bring new risks into the business. And I'll give you an example in the business that I'm in. We planned and brought into our organisation horizontal directional drilling part of the business, which was completely new. And not only that, a lot of our organisation was Dutch from that point of view. So it was bringing in a whole new set of people, who potentially didn't know, they're very safety conscious, but didn't have the kind of like competencies that we potentially expect in this country. But equally, the different risks that sort of business brings into your business. So, yeah, absolutely understanding the business strategy and understanding what risks that'll bring in. Another risk which come into a business is if you're looking to expand. I mean, we've all seen, and I've seen a number of times where there's rapid expansion in an organization, and rapid expansion means bringing in lots of new people. And in itself, that can be managed, but it takes a lot of managing. It helps if you've got a strong, positive health and safety culture to start with.
And a strong management system as well. I've seen that in the past, that you get a lot of different people from a lot of different organisations into a business, and they all bring the old safety management system with them.
Absolutely.
We've used this document. No, that's not the document we use around here. But that's what I'm used to.
Yeah, which in itself can bring great risk to the business. I was in an organisation a while back which had done exactly that, brought a new business, purchased a new business, and even 3 years later that old business was still using its old management system, and that is a huge risk to the business, because as we all know, I mean, of course we're not always wanting to just look at accidents and incidents, but in the unfortunate time if a serious incident happens and you get investigated on that, if you're not able to show that people are complying with your management system, you're in serious trouble to start with.
Of course.
But equally, you need consistency across your organisation. So you're right. You're absolutely right. Looking forward at the risks that can come in the business from business strategy, from the wider business strategy, are absolutely essential. But it's also looking at your standard health and safety risks and thinking, well, instead of just focusing on the stuff that we always focus on, what are our new risks coming up, or what do we really need to focus on getting better? I mean, a number of organisations have had in the past the 10 golden rules, and then if you go into the rail industry, you'll talk about your life-saving rules, and I think there's a lot of merit in those. I really do, but you've got to move on as well, because what your risks are today will not be your risk tomorrow. And it's another term that I use, and I'm sure I stole it. I think I did, which is what gets you here won't get you there. And this is another thing where organisations can start off really well and then flounder, because they do a certain approach, whether it be to reducing risk or improving behaviours or whatever, and it works for them. So they continue to do it and continue to do it, but they're then applying an approach which was to solve a particular problem, which is now solved. And it's important to recognise that, and to recognise when it's time to change and look at what you need to do next. And I've seen organisations 10 or 15 years later still doing the same thing because once upon a time it worked. And now what they do, they're flogging people all the time saying, you must make this work, and you must get more near miss recording in. We haven't got enough in this month. And it's a really dangerous trap to get into. We need to all be assessing all the time when it's time to refresh and when it's time to renew what we're doing, when we've got a new set of risks or a new set of challenges that we need to look at.
Yep, definitely. So we touched a little bit on your career journey. Where we had left off there, you had progressed into a national head of safety role. Where did you go from there, Duncan?
I guess once I got into a national health and safety role, I then took on a national HSEQ role, which quite often happens to health and safety professionals. You adopt the E and the Q. Now, having an engineering background, that came fairly easy to me anyway, because the quality particularly is really important from an engineering point of view. So I moved around a little bit for a while. I went working as a director of safety in a utilities organisation. I've worked as head of safety on a £1.5 billion project for another utilities utility company, and I've worked as head of health and safety for an infrastructure company as well. So I did do a little bit of moving around for a while, because I actually spent 25 years with the same company. And what I found is when I left that company, it took me a while to find my feet again and to settle down into something that felt right, if I'm honest with you. And I learned a lot from each one of the organisations I went to.
Mhm.
I've now settled in the company that I've been with. The company I've been with now for 4.5 years, and really enjoying it. I actually said to the MD, it feels like I've come home. So I head up health, safety, environment, quality, sustainability, and business continuity. Like I say, it just comes with the territory of being a health and safety professional. People love to add things to your title, but I love it because the organisation I'm involved in, I say it's a marine and civil engineering organisation, is so diverse. There's 5 different businesses within that organisation. And I've got a fantastic team as well. So I've got a head of health and safety, I've got a head of quality, I've got a head of sustainability, a team working for them across 5 different businesses doing very diverse different work, from extra high voltage works to water treatment works to flood defence works to marine works. It's just so exciting. And I love the marine works particularly because, being a civil engineer, you love to see large items of plant. And big barges with big cranes on and big piles you put in the ground, where instead of putting a 12-meter pile in the ground, you put in a 55-meter pile into the sea. It's big toys, and it's great to see. But I love going seeing those jobs and just seeing what we actually create and what we achieve. Because as well as being passionate about health and safety, I'm passionate about civil engineering, and I love to see great civil engineering jobs come to fruition. Yeah, that's my career right at this moment, head of HSEQS, and I guess that's what it'll continue to be. I do want to continue to I want to continue my passion for behaviour change. I've spent a lot of time going around the UK and Europe, sharing my thoughts on behaviour change as much as I can, because I'm really passionate about being part of making a difference. And the important thing is to recognise that, as we said before with Safety Differently, nobody's got the whole answer, but we've all got part of the answer. And I like to bring my thoughts on the part of the answer to that. And it really is around properly understanding why certain behaviours happen, about really genuinely engaging with the people that are doing the work and taking a positive approach. I do have approaches that I take that I believe are innovative, let's go for that, to the construction industry, and probably to some extent industry in general, approaches which have been used in the health sector for years, but haven't come into health and safety. That I'm bringing into construction safety, that I'm finding are making a huge difference. And again, they're nothing complicated, and I'm really keen to share that and share that at every opportunity. So my future I see as being more and more taking the opportunity to share my thoughts and my ideas on behaviour change and learn from other people's ideas at the same time.
Excellent. What's been your biggest challenge to date then, Duncan? Quite a long and illustrious career, a few different areas of industry as well, from the civil engineering side of things, project management, right up through the ranks of being health and safety professional, right up to the top of an organisation. What's been the one thing that stands out to you as the biggest challenge there?
One thing is interesting. I'm gonna cop out a little bit and say the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity are the same thing, which is people. Because that's what it's all about. And generally, people have very strong and entrenched beliefs. Whether those beliefs are ones which give us positive behaviours or not so good behaviours, the majority of us have very entrenched beliefs, and it's got a term in psychology called it's cognitive bias, and we've all got it, and I've got it in spades. Or we all believe we're right, and cognitive bias is all about it's looking for every opportunity and every piece of information that reinforces what you believe, and dismissing everything which actually contradicts what you believe. And we all do it all the time. Now, in terms of challenges from that point of view, you do get some really difficult characters, but I find that a really positive challenge. And I've found on a number of occasions that dealing with what you might consider to be the most difficult characters actually gives you the best results and your best advocates.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one particular conversation I had once where I was trialing out many years ago. Actually, I was trialing out a zonal system, electronic zonal system that you'll see a lot of these days advertised. You know, where you either have a hard at or something, and it tells you how close you are to plant. And this was probably about 15 years ago where we were trying this out on a particular site. And I went to this site and I said, I want to try this out. Can we go and speak to a few people? And they said, yeah. And he said, don't speak to him. Don't speak to him. I said, why not? He said, he's awkward as anything. You'll never get anything out of him. Everything's always a negative. And I thought, okay, that's a challenge.
That's the guy I want.
Exactly. So I went straight over to him and I started talking to him. I said, listen, we've got this system we want to try out, and it's this electronic zonal system. He said, tried it, it's crap, it doesn't work. And I thought, well, he hasn't tried it because this is the first time it's ever been invented, but I won't go down that route. I said, well, that's really interesting. I said, you know, because you've tried it before and you've seen what doesn't work, I'd really value your opinion on this system. So would you mind being one of the people that tries it out for us? And you know, you're obviously honest in what you say. I'd really value your honest opinion in this. And he went, oh yeah, I don't mind doing that at all. And he was, you know, and he became a massive advocate. And I've seen that so many times. It's so easy to dismiss people as being awkward, but it's just people with strong mindsets. And of course, we're all brought up by our own experiences, and some of us have come up with different experiences. Well, we've all come up with different experiences. And if those different experiences have got taken you to a place which might give you what is perceived to be a negative approach to health and safety, that doesn't mean that you don't want to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. You know, and strong-willed people like that can absolutely be your best advocates. In fact, to be honest with you, because there are in construction an awful lot of really strong-willed people, and if you want to change the mindset of those people, then you're not going to do it. But the other strong-willed people who they respect are. Mm-hmm. So if you can work with one person and change and help to change their mindset, then they've got a much better opportunity of being influential with other people similar to themselves than I'll ever be able to be. So from a challenge point of view, it's an opportunity. The challenge is dealing with those strong mindsets, but utilizing people and it's going back to that respecting everybody, knowing that everybody, actually there's nobody out there wants to do things unsafely. I'm certain of that. And it's channeling that and taking that passion that they've got and turning it into something that can really work for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that probably brings me on. We've had quite a lot of good advice in this podcast, and I think some of the viewers and listeners will get a lot from it. Duncan, what advice would you give to someone starting out in health and safety today if they've got an interest and a passion there and they want to get involved in the industry?
Well, I'd say the first thing is exactly what you just said. Have a passion for it, because you have to have a passion to make this work. Because, like I say, there are challenging times, and also if you don't have a passion for it, people will see through you very quickly. Yeah. So the first thing is have a passion for it and follow your passion. If your passion is something else, go and do something else. But then I would say, and it feeds into something I've already said. Listen to people. You know, you're going to be dealing people with 20, 30 years experience who have been doing the job for 20, 30 years. Now, I'll remember back to a conversation I had once, and it was the wrong conversation, where I was quite young into the industry, and certainly from a health and safety point of view anyway. I'd been in operational side for about 15 years, but I was talking to somebody, and he said, listen, lad, he said, I've been doing this for 15. He said, I've been doing this for all my life for 30 years. I said, well, you've been doing it wrong for 30 years, haven't you? And that probably wasn't going to win me any advocates from that point of view. So the strongest advice I think I can give you is listen to people rather than telling people. You know, you're going to gain so much understanding, not only on understanding how to do the job, but also in drawing out of people the best solutions. You know, I remember going into the gas and water industry for the first time, and I was dealing with high pressure gas mains, and I knew nothing about them. And I went to talk to this guy who was doing a live tapping into a high pressure gas main, and I said, I know nothing about this. Can you talk me through what you're doing? And he taught me through and he was really proud to talk me through it as well. But it was really interesting because he then said, come here and I'll show you all the tools and stuff as well. And he said, and we have this box of stuff here, and everything in here is calibrated, and it has a date on the front saying when it has to be calibrated. And I said, and I looked at it and said, oh, it's interesting now. He said, yeah. He said, I've just realised it's out of date. So he drew out himself, through having that conversation. Not only did I understand so much more about the job, but somebody passionate wanting to tell me about it actually identify something for himself that needed improving. So be passionate, do much more asking than telling. They're probably the two key things I would say.
Excellent. Thank you, Duncan. So that probably brings us to a bit of a conclusion. Thanks very much for coming on the podcast. I think the viewers and listeners will get a lot from this one. As I said, some great advice. We've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else you wanted to come in with, just in the summing up?
My summing would always be and thank you as well. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. My 3 words around how we deal with anything, behavior change, safety, is be positive, be inclusive, genuinely inclusive, and be future focused.
Excellent. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Blair. Much appreciated.
This podcast is sponsored by Inside Out Group, the specialists in high-risk and challenging filming and time-lapse, covering health and safety videos for rail, construction, and infrastructure projects nationwide.